am Janet Callahan. I live in the Metro Detroit area and have for about 20 years now. And I've been in the pagan community often for basically 25-ish years, a little longer than that, I think. I write a column for Sage Woman, and I've also written a book called Parenting Pagan Tots, and I'm also in a number of anthologies that are out there. So most everything that I'm in you can find on Amazon or on your favorite ebook store. So this is an essay from a few years ago. For those who also are not familiar, I have two kids. They are 9 and 12 this year. Both of them have autism and cerebral palsy and some other medical issues, and probably something genetic. We don't know yet, still working on it. But that takes up a lot of sort of the way that parenting works at our house. So I'm going to read you Virtues for a Special Needs Parent, Part 1. This ended up being 4 separate essays over the course of a little bit. In Doreen Valiente's version of Charge of the Goddess, she says, "Let my worship be within the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Therefore, let beauty and strength, power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you." Just about all parents do things out of love for their children. Frankly, even most really bad parents will tell you that they love their kids. We find joy in their smiles, and the delight in the world is contagious. I'd like to think most of us with special needs children have a little insight here, though. We understand just how hard won some of those accomplishments are, no matter how big or small. What about that second bit, though? It's an interesting list of virtues, and I've always found it interesting that they come in pairs. So over these few essays, I'm going to explore how they apply to pagan parents, particularly with special needs kids. First up is beauty and strength. Whether or not we admit it, most of us special needs parents know strength. It's strength that gets us through the hard days, that keeps us looking for the right mix of treatments and therapies for our kids, that gives us the power to argue with doctors, insurance companies, school districts, and more to get our children what they need. It's strength that lets us keep going day in and day out, strength that holds us together in the ER or the ICU, strength that helps us hide the tears, both the joyful and sorrowful, when things catch us by surprise. It's common for us to feel weak because we aren't in control. But strength isn't about controlling the situation. It's about forging a path through the mess to get to what we want. And beauty? I suspect most people think of beauty as hair and makeup and a stunning outfit over a perfect body. A culturally specific notion of all that, no less, that depends on your location and ethnicity and a million other things. But I don't think that's the kind of beauty we're called to here. This is the beauty of the soul, the beauty of a sleeping baby, the beauty of the smile on a child's face when they finally do exactly what they were wanting to do. We're called to seek the beauty in the world around us, whether or not everyone else thinks it's perfect. My mom used to have a magnet on her fridge with a pouting little boy, head and hands on a table, that said, "I know I'm somebody, 'cause God don't make no junk." And no matter what god or goddess or combination of gods you worship, that's still as true now as it was decades ago when I first read that message. All acts of love and pleasure are her rituals. Hug your kids, do something to make them laugh. Take care of yourself too. Take a long walk in the woods, soak in a bubble bath, sip a glass of wine, and remember that you and your child are beautiful, and you are goddess. So, as much as most of what I've written over the years has been about parenting, because that's been a huge focus of my life, it's harder and harder these days to write about parenting in a way that's relatable for us, because our journey is so far tracking away from other parents. So I suspect this will be maybe the last book that I publish on parenting, because it's just different at our house. So are there any questions that I should answer before we go on?
There is not at this time, no.
Okay. So the other thing that I'm working on these days is sort of a two-pronged approach, right? I'm working on a set of resources to help Pagan events be more inclusive to those with disabilities of all ages. And I'm working on some resources to help other Pagan families put on events that are child friendly. Generally, my theory is if it's child friendly enough that my kids can participate, then anybody's kids can participate. And it seems to me that we have this problem in the community of not always being as inclusive as we need to be. So that's really where I'm focusing right now. As soon as I finish editing this and get this published, that's the next step that I'm going to go on to. That, and I have a Sage Woman deadline this week. So when I first started writing for them, I was terrified of those deadlines, and I would write my articles way, way, way in advance. As soon as I turned in one, I would start the next one. And over the years, I've sort of gotten used to writing on a deadline that way, and it's become a lot easier, mostly. What else? What else?
So if you don't mind, I jump in. I actually have a question. So I love
Yeah.
that your sort of focus is going from children's books and now evolving into making Pagan events more inclusive, especially for children. What are some of the things that you are presenting as ideas to that anybody can instantly succeed, so to speak, of opening up that door wider? What are some of the concepts you've been finding?
So one of the things I did was I went through a whole bunch of Pagan festival websites to see what other festivals are doing, right? Here in Detroit, we have two big festivals. Both of them have children's programming. They do their programming a little differently, the two of them, because they're run by two different groups. But it turns out that, like, on the whole, about a third of festivals don't do anything at all. It's sort of open-ended. If you bring your kids, good luck.
Yeah.
And I suppose for some kids that works, right? It doesn't work for mine because mine are the kind of kids who like disappear if you close your eyes for a second, and then you have to call for help to find them, and like weird things happen, right? About a third do basically babysitting, whether it's a co-op or some other format. It's basically a drop off and play kind of deal. And the rest do at least some programming of some educational value. How much educational value varies a lot, but something. So one of the things that I am trying to encourage people to do is to use more, to consider more universal design type features, right? Universal design means that anybody can access it. One of my examples that I use when I'm trying to explain it to people in person is the difference between stairs and a ramp. Anybody can use a ramp. Not everybody can use stairs. So I talk about things like posting a big schedule, and don't just write it, use pictures, right? Our youngest kids can't read anyway, first of all. Second of all, we don't necessarily even know that every adult in the room can read. So pictures are always good. The second one is to have more structure, which I know is sort of not what people want to hear. But There are so many organizations out there that work with kids, and we don't have to start from scratch. We can look at what they're doing and use their screw ups to learn from, right? So we can look around and see what people are doing to keep kids safe. We can look around to look at how people are setting up events that include kids. We can look around and see how people are setting up events that include disabled adults. So it's not like we have to invent all of this. So that includes things like background checks, which I know when I worked with Spiral Scouts, people were just baffled at the idea that pagan groups would run background checks. It was just surprising to them that that was even a thing. And yet it was a really smart thing to do, you know. And now everybody's doing it. Churches do it. My kid's school does it for all parent volunteers. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely becoming a more accessible thing to do. It's becoming a more normalized thing to do, which is to the benefit of all, for sure. There is a question here from TS, and they say, what are some of the ways that you're pursuing to help with accessibility specifically?
So one of the things I'm working on is a toolkit, I guess you would call it, that includes printable things, a list of suggestions, like how to do a visual schedule, how to set up a space that has like a quiet area or sensory area in addition to everything else. It lists out things like, don't just give folding chairs, give options for sitting on the floor or on a ball or on whatever, right? It gives some of those sorts of options. Printable wise, one of the other things that I want to work on is a ritual kit that has like pictures for different things that happen in ritual so that they're all in order, and so that, like, I want to do them on Velcro so that you can put them in your order, because not everybody does ritual the same way, right? And then kids can follow along. We're going to do this next. We're going to do this next. We're going to do this next. Talking with other families in other religions, that's actually a huge thing for their kids. Because even when it's something like Catholic Mass, which is pretty much the same every week, and once you've been a few times, you kind of get the idea, it helps kids to have something to follow along, and so that they can know what's coming next.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. No, I'm with it. I love it. No, I do think that kids benefit from structure and repetition, et cetera, and it helps sort of comfort them, give them something to expect, and then it also helps concepts sink in. So I think we can all agree on that. Solanox has a great question.
I think some of that even for new people in our groups would help, because when I think back to the first public ritual I went to, I had no idea what was going on.
Right.
You
know, a little bit like just leaves in the wind.
Like, I had read books, I had read about rituals, but I had never been to one, and it was intimidating because I didn't actually know what to expect.
Right. Solanox has a great question. Can you tell us some more about your children and your experiences at pagan events for you specifically?
Oh, so, I mean, honestly, my kids don't go to many events because chaos. We went when they were smaller and containable, like when they were in strollers. Because they just don't, like, their attention span is not super long. Alex is functionally nonverbal. We're up to about, I don't know, 30 words now that he can say with his mouth words, as some of my friends call them, as opposed to other words, right? We know a lot of sign language, and he has a communication device that's a little computer that he carries that has, I don't know, 5,000 words, 8,000 words, something like that. So he's getting pretty good at making himself understood that way. But like, it's hard to take him to a ritual at this point, number one, because he doesn't have the attention span for it. And number two, at least in some circles, electronics are completely out. So if it's a no electronics thing, we're out because he can't communicate very well without it. You know, we've gone like to Pagan Pride and looked at all the vendors and looked at the stones and the crystals and like all the things that kids are normally drawn to. We've been to like play groups and stuff where they want kids to do art projects, but his fine motor skills are really, really weak. So art projects are just not his thing. You know, he doesn't want to color. He doesn't want to tie strings around acorns to make them into something else. Like, he's 12 and we're still working on tying shoes. So those sorts of detailed things are a big struggle for him. And that's, I guess the other thing is, you know, when we plan for kids events, we plan a lot of coloring and we plan a lot of like cut this out and glue it together kind of things. And if your kid can't do those things, then what are you going to do with them? And the answer right now is nothing, you know? So it's challenging. It's really challenging. And the older they get, sort of in some respects, the worse it is, because literally when I could put them in a stroller and go, we did all the time.
What activity were you really surprised? You're like, oh, this is actually a really accessible thing. What was something that you guys most enjoyed that kind of surprised you that was available, if anything?
One year, our local Pagan Pride, they roped off the children's area and they put the rope around the playground. Right. For us, that was the most accessible because he could go play on the slides and climbing gear, and like, we still couldn't leave him there and go to a class like other parents were doing, but at least there was something there that interested him that we could do, you know.
Okay. Lily brings up the question, do you feel there's a certain level of fear of liability that makes these events hesitant to address the issues?
I think it's not just, I mean, I think liability is part of it, right? Although I would think that if that was the case, they would be more concerned about things like background checks and controlling, or at least keeping an eye on which kid is going with who adult wise, right? You know, I know that I think in some cases it's not a fear of liability, it's just fear. It's just that they don't know, so they don't know what to do, and that level of fear sort of makes it hard. Yeah, we have one event here where we were approached last year about what it would take to make it so that we could just participate like everybody else. And the list was really long. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand that. But the fact that they were willing to even attempt it was huge for us. We took them, we had a daycare failure last year because our nanny quit the first week of summer. And so I ended up taking them with me to vend at an event. And they sat with me the whole weekend, basically. And they were like, well, why aren't they off playing with everybody else? And I'm like, well, here's the list. And so, you know, the fact that they were interested in actually discussing it was huge, because most of the time we can't even get that far.
Right. So what I'm hearing is the first and easiest step is to care about the experience, and then to ask questions and be open to, you may not be able to accomplish the whole list, but if you can, you know, sort of make steps each event to, you know, reach some of the list, it's going to at least improve.
Right.
Yeah. That is all the questions that we have for now.
Okay. What else? What else? You know, I'm not sure what else I should say. I'm hoping to have this book published before the end of the year. And we'll see how that goes. It looks like school is going to be sort of challenging this year, and that may take up more time than I'm expecting.
Yeah, that's fair. That is very fair. All right. Well, we're definitely looking forward to that. Is there anything else that you would like to share for today?
I don't think so. I think that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Janet. We really appreciate it. Everyone can check out the book, hopefully, if it comes out later this year, on Amazon or any of pretty much most ebook commerce stores. Otherwise,
Yep.
definitely keep an eye out for it very shortly afterwards. Thank you so much, Janet. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
We do have a couple more questions coming in if you'd like to answer
We
them.
do. Okay.
Oh, good. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Took a second. So, can you share your experiences in Spiral Scouts? Thank you, Solenox.
So you have to understand that when I did Spiral Scouts, it was before I had kids. Back in the very, very, very early days, I think we were in the first year of Spiral Scouts' existence, we were involved. We actually were charter number 19, and I think they're in the 300 or 400s now. My husband and I co-led a group with some of the parents of the kids in our group here in Detroit. There were actually 2 groups here that first year. We are out here in like Troy, Royal Oak, and the other group was out by Ann Arbor. And we went camping, and we did a ton of stuff. We tried to structure it so that every parent, every family was equally involved in making everything happen. And I ended up helping write some badges and helping with the badge books, and I was program director for a while. And I don't know, all in all, it was a really, really cool experience. We're not in Spiral Scouts right now because group things are hard for my kids. And a group would have to be really, really tailored to functioning in a way that would work for them. The group that was out in Ann Arbor used to joke that they had like 1.4 diagnoses per person, including the adults. So basically, they had kids with learning disabilities. They had at least one kid with autism. They had several people with anxiety and PTSD and other mental health challenges. And so all of their meetings really did stress that whole energy balance, and like, we're going to do something active, and then we're going to do something quiet, and we're just going to roll all that together. And I think my kids would have done well in that circle, honestly. But their kids were between the ages of about 3 and 10 back 15 years ago. All of those kids are in college now. So.
TS brings up the question, how are you and your kids doing with quarantine and the stress of this time?
Oh, so that's actually sort of funny. This is normal for us. My kids, when they were very small, had a lot of medical challenges, and we stayed home like this every year from basically September or October through April or May. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't eat at restaurants. We didn't take them to stores. We didn't go to indoor playgrounds. We didn't go to the park very often, honestly, because every cold turned into a hospital stay. So we just didn't go. And that's pretty typical for kids who had similar medical challenges to ours. Everybody quarantines in the winter. So to a large extent, lots of this is just normal for us. They're bigger. They know there are more things out there. They go stir crazy a lot faster. But, you know, this is just typical for them. They are used to not being able to just go. So we go on a lot of car rides. Almost every day we go for about an hour drive, and we go for walks. They're big enough to ride bikes now, so when the weather's nice, like they ride the bikes to the park with one of us, and then assuming it's not too busy, they stay and play, and then they come home.
Lily brings up the question, in retail, they're trained for Code Adam to immediately address a missing child in a store. Do you think a similar program can be taught to event hosts?
Oh yeah, totally. Like that's not even a hard thing to teach, right? Everybody understands the concept. I think Solenox has experience with the festival that actually told us they would help figure out how to make it so that we could stay. That when she went one year with one of her kids, they were like, nope, everybody knows who he is and we're ready if there's a problem.
Well, Bill's question sort of follows along that line. I believe he means in festivals, etc. Did you have parents, and also in Spiral Scouts, did you have parents really step up and help make things happen for the children? Or did it always have to fall on event hosts? Or did you find that others would also join the cause, even if things were not necessarily as long of a list for their children to complete?
So I think for it to work, it has to be a mixture of those things, right? There's a really great book out there called Don't Leave Your Friends Behind, and it's about social justice circles and children. But there is a lot in it that I think is really applicable to our community as a whole, right? Kids benefit when they have lots of adults in their lives who pay attention to them and who care about them. And our communities benefit from that. But if we put everything on parents, then sometimes nothing gets done, right? Or only the things that matter to that person get done. And when their kids are older, then there's nothing again. And actually, I've seen that happen like in cycles. There will be some really great event that goes on over and over again, some play group or whatever. And as soon as that person's kid gets too old for it, there's nobody to pick up the torch and carry it on, you know? I think that event organizers have to realize that if you discount everybody who's a parent because you're not willing to support parents being at events, then you're losing a huge percentage of your able-bodied adults and even disabled adults who might be able to do other things that you need done because you're not making a way for it to be possible for them. I think honestly, like that's how the rest of the world works. And again, we don't have to try and create something from scratch. We should look at how everybody else does it.
Right. We don't necessarily always have to reinvent the wheel, even though we love to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and that's
we should save ourselves some time. We should save ourselves some time and effort and take some notes and
yeah. Well, and that's interesting. So let's see, what year is it? Last Hecate Sickle Festival, it was in Paramount that they bring on somebody to act as a disability liaison to sort of speak from a place of perspective of, you know, how to make things more accessible. And one thing that they brought up was making sacred service accessible to all types of abilities and energies, etc. So they were able to contribute a way to make sure that all festival goers had that opportunity to be a part of that side of the event. And that was actually really something beautiful to see. And they didn't take any extra effort really to make it happen, except to go through the effort of the discussion and follow through. So it was really beautiful.
And that's something that comes up a lot in disability forums about pagan events. Like, if you start out by saying everybody who attends this ritual has to be able to dance for 3 hours, right? You're automatically excluding a ton of people for a ton of different reasons. Is there a reason that everybody has to dance all 3 hours? Is there a reason that you can't have a chair? Is there a reason that, like, and so I think it's worth remembering that every person should be able to participate. Every person can participate. We have to think about what we're putting in the way, right? Chairs are something so simple at so many rituals. Like, if you don't give people a chance to sit down, you're taking out anybody who is older, anybody who has an injury, anybody who had, like, all of these things. And it's over something kind of silly, honestly. you know and that's sort of across the board. It's every event we do, every place we have, right? Years ago we went to a cookie walk here for a local group that was trying to get a building, and they had their cookie walk at a public, like a city building that had rooms to rent out for events, right? Like a community center kind of building. Not exactly their community center, but something like that. All right, so I put my kids in our double stroller with 100 pounds of medical gear. We get there, it's on the 3rd floor. The elevator is literally, like, I can get the stroller in, but I'm not sure I can ride up in the elevator with the kids in the stroller. Like, that's how big the elevator was. And I'm looking at it going, how would you get in here with a wheelchair? Right? It's every event we have to assess, like, okay, we're having this at a park. Is the park accessible? Does the park have curb cuts? Can we get a park that actually has sidewalks as opposed to a park that doesn't? Like, that's a minor detail. It's like this park versus that park. And it makes it so much easier for so many people to participate. Even just having somebody that they can call, that, like, one year I called a festival or emailed them and said, hey, I have a kid who is in a stroller that we use as her wheelchair. How accessible is the park that we're going to? Right? Is there paved stuff? Because we don't have, we didn't have big squishy wheels. We didn't have off-road wheels. It was just a stroller. And they were like, no, this part is paved and this is paved and this stuff is all in buildings, and this, like, they actually knew when I asked that question what I was asking for and what things they needed to tell me. And it helps to have people organizing events who have that experience. I don't know if I would have known what to say to somebody, say 15 years ago, if they had asked me if a space was wheelchair accessible. But the year my son was born, my husband was in a car wreck and broke his leg. So I had a kid in a stroller and a husband in a wheelchair. And we learned really, really fast how many places just don't work. How much space you really need, So it's helpful to either have some guidelines, like you can Google for that online, or to have somebody who has some experience, because then you find out very quickly how it works, right? We get away with a lot because religious groups don't have to meet the ADA all the time, but we turn a lot of people away because of it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and like going back on what you said earlier, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's leaning on the experience of those who have experienced it. They know it. They're aware of all of these things, and they want things to be more accessible. So they're quite approachable. You just need to be able to open up that conversation and be willing to listen and adapt to that. So.
Right. And it takes a little humility, right? It takes being able to say, I don't know. Can you help me?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay, I don't think that there's any questions at this time. We'll just we'll do a last round on questions. So
last call.
Yeah, last call. Feel free to let them forward through, and Janet is more than happy to answer them. We'll just give them a second. There's about a 30-second delay, but this has been a really fascinating conversation. I'm really looking forward to reading your book when it comes out, either later this year or early next, maybe. Anything else in the works, in the mind's eye?
Like I said, I have this sort of plan for trialing some stuff at Convocation this next year, assuming we're in person. I don't know if we will be or not. But stuff to go to see if we can make it work for my kids to be in the kids programming. And then I'm working on a workbook for people who want to put on kids programming, because when we polled one of the big parenting groups, 50% of people said they wished there was something for their kids, whether it's Scouts or a play group or something, but there's nothing near them.
Right.
Which always surprises me.
Yeah, same. Oh, we did. Let's see. Oh, Kenya's asking, when is your next book?
So it was supposed to be done already. I have to finish editing it and then do all the layout. So hopefully before the end of the year.
It's on its way. It's definitely
going.
Okay, I think that's it for questions for today officially. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your perspective and knowledge. And we are looking forward to reading that. I've shared the information in the chat box for everybody. I will repost that as well. This is Janet Callahan presenting In the Spiral Essays on Pagan Parenting, written while living in the moment, which you will be able to pick up very shortly, I believe, on Amazon and other e-commerce stores. Thank you, Janet. Have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.